When my oldest son died, I received a call that changed everything. Mrs. Reed, I've discovered something about your son that you need to know. It's urgent. Come to my office immediately, but don't tell anyone in the family. It could be dangerous. His boss's voice was trembling. When I arrived, I froze when I saw who was there. But before we continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories travel. I never thought that at 62 years old, I would be attending the funeral of my firstborn. James was only 38, a man of integrity, dedicated to his work as a financial analyst, and above all, an exemplary son. They say no mother should have to bury her child, and now I understood the devastating pain behind those words. James's body had been found in his apartment 3 days earlier, the victim of an apparent heart attack. No one saw it coming. He was always healthy, exercised regularly, and had just passed a complete physical. The doctors spoke of sudden death, an undetected genetic predisposition, cold terms that didn't explain why my son was now inside a casket. During the wake, I watched my younger son, Ryan, organizing everything with admirable efficiency. He and his wife, Caroline, handled every detail of the funeral while I remained seated, numb with grief. "Mom, leave it in our hands. You just need to rest," Ryan repeated, using that protective tone he had adopted with me in recent years. Something bothered me, but I attributed it to my fragile emotional state. Ryan seemed too controlled. It's not that I expected him to be hysterical, but there was an almost unsettling serenity in his posture. Caroline remained by his side, always attentive, always watchful, as if she were monitoring every movement around her. After the burial at the cemetery, everyone went back to my house. While the guests helped themselves to the coffee Caroline had set out, I sat in a corner of the living room, looking at the portrait of James on the fireplace mantel. It was then that I noticed the whispered conversations between Ryan and Caroline. Crossed glances. Something seemed out of place. "Mom, we need to talk about the future," Ryan said, sitting next to me once the last guests had left. "This house is too big for you alone. Caroline and I were talking, and we think it would be best if you sold it and moved into a smaller apartment, or maybe that retirement community near our house in Alpharetta." The suggestion caught me by surprise. "But son, we just buried your brother. I don't think now is the time to." "That's exactly why, Mom," Caroline interrupted with her melodious voice. "James left so suddenly. Life is unpredictable. We need to think about your well-being." I nodded distractedly, unable to process the conversation. That's when the phone rang. Ryan quickly got up to answer it. "Who was that?" I asked when he returned with a tense expression. "No one important," he replied evasively. "Just someone from James's office wanting to talk to you about some documents." "What documents?" "Nothing to worry about right now, Mom." I told them to call back another time. "You need to rest." That night, alone in my room, exhaustion finally overcame me. I was almost asleep when my cell phone vibrated. Unknown number. "Mrs. Reed? This is Stephen Pierce, the chief financial officer at the company where your son worked." "Yes," I answered, trying to clear my mind. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you urgently, in private. It's about your son." My heart sped up. "About James? What happened?" There was a pause before he replied. "I can't talk over the phone. Could you come to my office early tomorrow morning? And please, do not mention this conversation to anyone, especially your other son or his wife." "Why not? Please, trust me. It's for your own safety. Come at 9 o'clock in the morning. To the company headquarters in Midtown." After hanging up, I lay awake for hours. Why such secrecy? What could Stephen Pierce know about James that required such discretion? And why specifically mention Ryan and Caroline? The next morning, I told Ryan I needed to pick up some prescriptions. He insisted on going with me, but I was firm. "Son, I need some time alone." "It's just the pharmacy." I drove to the business district in Midtown, where James had worked for over 10 years. The imposing glass and steel building always impressed me. At the reception desk, I informed them I had a meeting with Stephen Pierce. I was led to the top floor, an executive area where I had never been before. Stephen greeted me personally, a middle-aged man with a grave expression. "Mrs. Reed, Thank you for coming. Please come in. His office was spacious, with a panoramic view of the city. He closed the door and pressed a button that tinted the glass windows. I need to ensure total privacy for this conversation, he explained. Mr. Pierce, I'm starting to get worried. What is so important and secret about my son? He took a deep breath. Mrs. Reed, what I am about to tell you will seem unbelievable, but I ask that you hear me out. I nodded, feeling a chill. Your son James came to me about 3 months ago with a very serious concern. He discovered serious financial irregularities involving your other son, Ryan. Irregularities? What kind? Embezzlement from the company where Ryan works. James discovered it by chance while analyzing some documents that fell into his hands, but that was only the beginning. Stephen took a thick folder from his drawer and opened it in front of me. James discovered that Ryan wasn't just embezzling money. He was planning something much more serious involving you. I looked at the documents, seeing copies of emails, bank statements, and something that looked like a sales contract for my house with my forged signature. I don't understand, I murmured, feeling the room spin. Mrs. Reed, James discovered that Ryan and Caroline have enormous debts gambling, failed investments, a lifestyle far beyond what they can afford. They plan to sell your house and transfer your entire estate to themselves as soon as possible. But that doesn't make sense. They would need my authorization. Exactly, and that's where James became truly worried. He found communications between Ryan and a doctor, discussing how they could have you declared mentally incompetent to make decisions. I felt as if the air had been sucked from my lungs. That's absurd. Unfortunately, it's not. James collected all this evidence. When he confronted Ryan, the situation became dangerous. Dangerous how? Stephen hesitated. Mrs. Reed, James feared for his own life. That's when we decided he needed to disappear temporarily. Disappear? What do you mean? Stephen looked toward the door of his private office bathroom. It opened slowly, and then I saw the impossible. James walked into the office. My son, whom I had buried 3 days earlier, was alive, standing right in front of my eyes. Mom, he said softly, his eyes glistening. Everything went dark around me. The last thing I remember is hearing James shout my name as I fell. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on the office sofa. James was holding my hand. For a moment, I thought it was all just a cruel dream. The funeral, the grief, everything. Mom, it's me, he said, squeezing my hand. Forgive me for the suffering I caused you. It was the only way to protect you. How? I murmured, touching his face, feeling his warm, real skin. We buried you. I saw your body. It wasn't me, James explained gently. Stephen helped me fake everything. The body was an unidentified man from the morgue, with physical characteristics similar to mine. We have contacts who helped us with the necessary documents. I looked at Stephen, who nodded gravely. I know it sounds like a bad spy movie, Mom, but when I found out what Ryan was planning, I realized I needed time to gather all the evidence and protect you. If I just disappeared, he would be suspicious. I needed everyone, including him, to believe I was dead. But why? Ryan is your brother, my son. He would never. Mom, James interrupted gently. I know it's hard to believe, but I have proof. He took the folder from Stephen and began to show me documents. Emails exchanged between Ryan and a psychiatrist discussing how they could document my supposed mental incapacity. Bank statements showing enormous debts in Ryan's and Caroline's names. A detailed plan to sell my house and put me in a nursing home. In the last 2 years, Ryan and Caroline have accumulated debts of over $300,000, James explained. Gambling, high-risk investments, a lifestyle they can't afford, and now they're desperate. And their solution was to eliminate me? I asked, feeling a pain that went beyond the physical. Not physically, Mom, but legally, yes. They plan to get legal guardianship over you, control all your assets, sell everything, and eventually place you in a cheap facility while they spend your money. I suddenly remembered the little things that had been happening in recent months. Ryan and Caroline commenting that I was forgetful. Documents I didn't remember signing. Caroline organizing my medications, insisting I needed stronger doses. Have they been drugging me? I asked, horrified at the possibility. I'm afraid so, Stephen said. We analyzed some of your medications that James discreetly collected. We found traces of drugs that can cause mental confusion and drowsiness. That's why I've felt so tired lately, I murmured. I thought it was depression, or my age. Part of it might be, James said gently, but they were helping the process along. I fell silent, trying to process it all. My own son, planning to steal everything I had built over a lifetime of work. And to do it, he was willing to declare me incompetent, to snuff me out while I was still breathing. What do we do now? I finally asked. We need to be careful, Stephen said. Ryan cannot know that James is alive or that you've discovered the plan. Not yet. So we continue the charade? I pretend nothing happened. For now, James said. We're gathering more evidence, getting the right authorities involved. When we have everything in order, we will confront Ryan and Caroline legally. I looked at my son, my living son, and felt a mixture of joy at having him back and a profound pain for the betrayal of the other. How am I going to look at Ryan, knowing all this? I asked. It will be hard, Mom, but you're stronger than you realize. James hugged me, and for the first time since I received the news of his death, I truly cried. Not tears of mourning, but of relief, anger, and determination. When I returned home that afternoon, I found Ryan waiting for me, visibly irritated. Where were you, Mom? I was worried. You said you were going to the pharmacy, but when I called, they said they hadn't seen you today. I took a deep breath, remembering James's advice to act normally. Oh, I went to a different pharmacy. Then I ended up stopping at a cafe. I just needed a moment alone. Ryan studied me, as if evaluating whether I was lying. Well, you shouldn't just leave like that without telling us. You're not in the emotional state to be wandering around the city. I'm not an invalid, son, I replied, trying not to show the rage growing in my chest. I just needed some time to myself. Of course, Mom. We're just worried about you. Right, Caroline? I hadn't noticed Caroline standing in the kitchen doorway, observing our conversation with that placid smile that now seemed calculating to me. Of course, she replied, approaching. In fact, I brought your nighttime medications. You seem so tired. She extended a glass of water and 2 pills. I looked at the pills that, until yesterday, I would have taken without question. Thank you, dear, but I'll take them later. I don't have an appetite right now. I saw a quick exchange of glances between them. It's important to stay on schedule with your medication, Eleanor, Caroline insisted, especially the ones for sleep. The doctor was very clear about that. Which doctor? I asked innocently, another glance between them. Dr. Perez, Ryan answered quickly. Remember we took you last week? You were so confused after the news about James. I had never met any Dr. Perez. It was all a lie. Oh, yes, I pretended to agree, but I'd really rather take them later. That night, I locked my bedroom door, something I never used to do, and flushed the pills down the toilet. For the first time in months, I slept without medication. My mind seemed clearer the next morning, as if a fog had lifted. In the following days, I maintained a facade of normalcy. I let Ryan and Caroline think they still controlled the situation, while I secretly communicated with James on a prepaid cell phone Stephen had given me. A week after the revelation, Ryan sat down with me during breakfast with some papers in his hand. Mom, I've been thinking about what we discussed regarding the house. It really is too big for you alone, and the maintenance is expensive. I replied vaguely, sipping my coffee. I found a perfect apartment for you. Small, cozy, with 24-hour security and nursing staff in the building. Nursing staff? Of course. And what about the house? I asked, feigning interest. Well, I thought we could sell it. The real estate market is good. With the money, we buy the apartment for you, and the rest we can invest to ensure your comfort. I mean, you would manage the money. Ryan seemed surprised by my direct tone, but recovered quickly. Of course, Mom. You don't have to worry about those things. We'll take care of everything. And what if I don't want to sell? His smile faltered for an instant. Mom, I know you're going through a difficult time with the loss of James, but you need to think about the future. You can't keep living in the past. I'm not living in the past, Ryan. I'm questioning why you're in such a hurry to sell my house. He sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. Well, there are some practical matters. Caroline and I have some unexpected expenses, and since the house will eventually be ours anyway, it makes sense to move the process along and use some of the money now when we need it. There it was, the partial confession. I tried to control my anger. So, basically, you want to sell my house to pay your debts? Ryan turned pale. That's not what I said. It was exactly what you said, son. He stood up, visibly disturbed. I think you're not understanding. Maybe you're still too upset. I understand perfectly, I replied calmly. I just don't agree. In the following days, I sensed a subtle shift in Ryan and Caroline's approach. They moved from direct insistence to a more insidious strategy. Concerned comments about my memory became more frequent. Mom, did you take your medicine today? You seem confused, Ryan would ask, even when I was perfectly lucid. Eleanor, do you remember that conversation we had yesterday about selling the house? Caroline would question, referring to a conversation that never happened. They were little seeds of doubt, planted daily, designed to make me question my own sanity. If I didn't know what was happening, I might easily have started to doubt myself. At night, when I was alone, I exchanged messages with James, who updated me on the progress of the investigation. Stephen had hired a private investigator and was gathering concrete proof of Ryan's debts, the forgeries, and the plan to have me declared incompetent. We need more time, James wrote. We're almost ready, but we have to be careful. Ryan has dangerous connections. That intrigued me. What kind of connections would my son have? The boy I raised, who played with toy cars in the yard, who cried on my lap when he was cut from the baseball team? How had he transformed into this calculating stranger? One afternoon, while Ryan and Caroline were out, I decided to do something risky. I went into the guest room where they had been sleeping since James's funeral. Rummaging through their things, I found a folder hidden in the back of the closet. Inside were credit card statements showing astronomical debts to casinos, luxury stores, expensive trips. There were also documents related to loans from loan sharks, the dangerous connections James had mentioned. Ryan owed money to dangerous people and was desperate to pay them. I also found an envelope with photos. I was shocked to see images of myself, clearly taken without my knowledge, in moments where I looked confused or tired, likely after taking the medications they gave me. There were notes on the back of each photo. Confused upon waking, didn't remember where she put her keys, asked the same question twice. They were building a case against me, meticulously documenting any normal lapse to use as evidence of my supposed mental incapacity. There was also a letter from a doctor, presumably the Dr. Perez, discussing my case. The doctor suggested that, with the proper documentation, he could issue a report attesting that I was suffering from early-onset dementia and lacked the capacity to manage my own affairs. I photographed everything with the phone James had given me and put the documents back exactly as they were. My heart was pounding, not just from fear of being caught, but from the confirmation of the betrayal. Seeing the concrete proof was very different from just hearing about it. I sent the photos to James, who replied immediately, "This is exactly what we needed. We're moving the plan up. We'll have everything ready in 2 days." That same night, during dinner, Ryan brought up the house again. "Mom, I found an interested buyer. He's willing to pay above market value, but we need to give him an answer quickly." "What a coincidence," I commented casually. "You find a buyer before I've even decided if I want to sell." Ryan exchanged a look with Caroline. "Actually," he said slowly, "we already talked about this, remember? You agreed it would be for the best." "I don't remember that conversation," I replied, knowing perfectly well it never happened. "See?" Caroline said, with an exaggerated expression of concern. "This is what we're talking about, Eleanor. These memory lapses are becoming more frequent." "It's not a memory lapse," I stated firmly. "It's impossible for me to forget agreeing to sell my house." "Mom?" Ryan sighed. "This is getting complicated. Maybe it's time to consider a more serious evaluation," Dr. Perez mentioned. "Which Dr. Perez?" I interrupted, feigning confusion. "I've never consulted any Dr. Perez." Another exchange of glances. "The geriatrician who saw you last month," Caroline said patiently, as if speaking to a child. "Do you really not remember?" "No, I don't remember," I replied, "because it never happened." Ryan put down his silverware and faced me. "Mom, this is exactly what worries us. You've been having these episodes. You deny things that happened. You forget important conversations. Or maybe, I suggested, you're saying we had conversations that never happened. The silence that followed was tense. I realized I had gone too far. I wasn't supposed to confront them yet. Excuse me, I backtracked. I'm tired. I think I'll go to bed early tonight. Of course, Mom, Ryan said, relief visible on his face. Caroline will bring you your medications. No need, I replied quickly. I already took them. You took them? Caroline asked, frowning. When? Before dinner. Another exchange of glances. Mom, you shouldn't be taking medication without supervision. You might get confused with the doses. I've been taking these medications for years, Ryan. I know how they work. I retreated to my room, locking the door again. Seconds later, I heard a soft knock. Eleanor? Caroline called. I brought you some tea. I don't want any, thank you, I replied. But it will help you sleep. I'm fine, Caroline. I just want to be alone. I heard her hesitate on the other side of the door. Then her footsteps moved away. I took the hidden phone and texted James. They're getting more insistent. I think they've realized I'm not taking their drugs anymore. I don't know how much longer I can keep up this charade. The reply came quickly. Hold on for just one more day, Mom. Tomorrow night. This will all be over. The next morning, Ryan announced he had a surprise. Mom, I managed to schedule a consultation with a memory specialist. He can see us this afternoon. Today? I questioned. So suddenly? It's a special favor, he explained. This doctor is in high demand, but he made an exception for us. I was immediately suspicious. Could this be the doctor? Perez, who would issue the false report? They were accelerating their plan, probably pressured by their creditors. I don't know, Ryan. I'm not feeling very well today. All the more reason to go, he insisted. The doctor can prescribe something more effective than those old medications you're taking. I needed to buy time. I sent a discreet message to James, informing him about the appointment. Do not go, no matter what, he replied. It's a trap. We're moving up our plan too. Stay home today. Make any excuse. Ryan, I said, coming out of my room after messaging James. I'm sorry, but I can't go to the appointment. I just remembered we scheduled to clear out James's apartment today. The leasing office called. Ryan's expression hardened. That can wait, Mom. Your health is more important. No, it can't, I insisted. The lease is up today. If we don't get his things, they'll throw them out. They're the last memories of your brother. Ryan looked like he was about to explode, but contained himself. Fine, he said, controlling his voice. I'll reschedule the appointment. But tomorrow, without fail, okay? Of course, I agreed, knowing that by then, everything would have changed. That afternoon, Ryan left to run some errands. Caroline stayed at the house, watching me like a hawk. She insisted I have some tea, which I politely refused. She suggested I rest, that we watch a movie together, anything to keep me in her sight. Around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Caroline went to answer it and returned with a pale expression. Eleanor, she said, her voice trembling, there's someone here to talk to you about James. I stood up from the sofa, feeling my heart race. Was James's plan already in motion? In the entryway, I found a tall man in a suit, holding a police badge. Mrs. Eleanor Reed? He asked. I'm Detective Rodriguez. I need to speak with you about your son, James Reed. Yes, of course, I replied, trying to maintain my composure. Caroline moved closer, placing her hand on my shoulder in a gesture I once would have interpreted as supportive, but now recognized as control. I'm Caroline, her daughter-in-law. What's wrong? The detective gave her a neutral look. If you don't mind, I need to speak with Mrs. Reed in private. But she's very fragile, Caroline insisted. She just lost her son. I understand, but this is a confidential matter. It's all right, Caroline, I intervened. We can use the study. I led the detective to my late husband's study and closed the door. As soon as we were alone, he spoke in a low voice. Mrs. Reed, I'm a friend of Stephen Pierce's. Your son James came to me with some very serious evidence regarding illegal activities involving your other son, Ryan. So, this was it. The plan was in motion. We are about to arrest Ryan for fraud, forgery, and attempted fraudulent legal interdiction, he continued. But first, we need to ensure your safety. There's a possibility Ryan will react unpredictably when he finds out he's been caught. What should I do? I asked, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. A police team is stationed near your house. We're waiting for Ryan to return to make the arrest. And Caroline? Yes, we have evidence that she was an accomplice in the entire scheme. Both will be arrested. I tried to process the magnitude of it all. My two sons, one faking his own death to protect me, the other conspiring against me. There's one more thing you need to know, the detective added, lowering his voice even more. Your son James is here. My heart leaped. Here? Where? In a car, a block away. He insisted on being present, despite the risks. Do you want to see him before we arrest Ryan? Yes, I replied without hesitation. The detective took out his cell phone and sent a quick message. I'm going to create a distraction for Caroline. When I walk out with her toward the living room, you slip out the back door. There's a black car waiting on the corner. I nodded, feeling like a character in a spy movie. What do I tell her about our conversation? Tell her we're investigating some irregularities in James's life insurance. Nothing to worry about, just bureaucracy. We left the study, and the detective asked Caroline to show him the insurance documents. As they headed to the living room, I slipped quietly out the kitchen door that led to the patio. My heart was beating so loudly I was afraid Caroline could hear it. I crossed the garden, went out the side gate, and spotted the black car. The back door opened as I approached. I got in quickly, and there he was, James, my son, alive. We hugged in silence, both of us trembling with emotion. There were no words for that moment. Mom, he finally said, it's ending. Today, all of this ends. How are you? I asked, still holding his face in my hands, as I did when he was a boy. Worried about you. It was harder than I imagined, being away, knowing the danger. Your brother? I started, but I couldn't finish the sentence. I know, James replied sadly. I still can't believe what he's become. Stephen, who was in the front passenger seat, turned to us. Ryan just pulled into the driveway, he reported. The police are moving in now. I want to be there, I declared. Mom, it's not safe, James protested. I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to look him in the eye when he finds out I know everything. James exchanged a look with Stephen, who nodded reluctantly. All right, but I'm going in with you. It's time for Ryan to know he didn't succeed. We returned to the house, now accompanied by 2 police cars. When we entered the living room, Ryan was sitting on the sofa, talking tensely with Caroline. They both turned at the sound of the door. The shock on Ryan's face when he saw James was something I will never forget. His eyes widened. His face turned as pale as if he had seen a ghost, which, in a way, is exactly what he was seeing. What is this? He stammered, getting to his feet. Hello, brother, James said calmly. Caroline let out a choked scream, covering her mouth with her hands. Impossible, she murmured. You're dead. We saw. You saw what I needed you to see, James replied. Just as I saw what you two were planning for our mother. The police officers entered the living room, led by Detective Rodriguez. Ryan Reed, Caroline Reed. You are under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, document forgery, conspiracy, and attempted fraudulent interdiction. Ryan looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting from James to me to the police. Suddenly, his gaze hardened. This is ridiculous, he exclaimed. You can't prove anything. Actually, we can, the detective said, motioning to one of the officers, who opened a folder. We have copies of emails exchanged between you and Dr. Perez Mendoza discussing the issuance of a false medical report declaring your mother mentally incompetent. We have the forged documents with her signature. We have proof that you opened credit cards in her name without her consent. Ryan looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Mom, it's not what it looks like, he tried. We were trying to protect you. Protect me? I repeated, keeping my voice steady despite the pain consuming me. By drugging me, stealing my money, planning to put me in an asylum? Is that protection, Ryan? You don't understand. We were desperate. Because of the gambling debts? I asked. From the loan sharks? From the extravagant spending? He seemed shocked that I knew so many details. How? I found your documents, I explained. The day you were out. I saw everything. The statements, the photos you took of me, the notes, everything. Caroline, silent until then, suddenly lunged in my direction. You meddling old woman. You ruined everything. An officer restrained her before she could reach me. Caroline Reed, you are under arrest. As the police handcuffed the pair, I looked at Ryan, no longer the boy I raised, but a stranger whose eyes burned with rage. This isn't over, he threatened as he was led away. I have connections. You're going to regret this. James put his arm around me, protecting me as he had always done. It's over, Mom, he said softly. They can't hurt you anymore. But as I watched my younger son being taken away by the police, I knew that some wounds would never fully heal. The days following Ryan and Caroline's arrest were a whirlwind of emotions and bureaucracy. Statements to the police, meetings with lawyers, endless forms to annul the forgeries and undo the financial damage they had caused. But amid all that chaos, there was a profound joy. James was alive. The official resurrection of my son required almost as much paperwork as his death. Stephen mobilized a legal team to deal with the complications. There were fines to pay for falsifying the death certificate, explanations to give to the authorities, a new burial. To arrange for the actual occupant of the casket, we buried a man with no family whose identity was temporarily borrowed thanks to Stephen's contacts. What was it like, living in hiding all this time? I asked James one night as we ate dinner alone at home for the first time since everything had happened. Lonely, he admitted. I stayed in a safe apartment that Stephen arranged in Nashville. I only went out when necessary, always in disguise. The hardest part was knowing you were suffering, believing I was dead, but exposed to the danger. Why didn't you tell me sooner? James sighed, putting his silverware down. That was my biggest hesitation. Stephen and I argued about it for days. In the end, we decided that your reaction of grief needed to be genuine so Ryan wouldn't suspect. If you knew the truth, you might not have been able to keep up the facade. You underestimated my acting skills, I commented with a small smile. Maybe, he smiled back. But we also didn't know how far Ryan was willing to go. If he sensed you knew something, he might have sped up his plans. The implication hung heavy between us. How far would my own son have gone to get what he wanted? The hearings start next week, I said, changing the subject. The lawyer said Ryan is trying for a plea deal. Typical of him, James replied bitterly, always looking for the easy way out, even at the expense of others. Caroline is cooperating with the prosecution, I added, offering information in exchange for a reduced sentence. Apparently, she's pinning all the blame on Ryan. I'm not surprised. She was always manipulative. I looked out the window, at the garden where my two sons used to play together, building forts from branches and leaves, defending themselves from imaginary enemies. Where did we go wrong with him, James? What happened to that sweet boy we knew? James was silent for a moment. I don't think we went wrong, Mom. Some people just make bad decisions, then more bad decisions to cover up the first ones, and before they know it, they're trapped in a downward spiral. But to try and steal from his own mother? Drug me? Put me in a home? His debts were worse than we imagined. The investigator found out Ryan owed over $400,000 to loan sharks connected to organized crime. They were threatening his life and Caroline's. He could have asked for help, I argued. We would have found a solution. Pride, maybe? Shame? Or maybe he was in so deep that he didn't see a way back? I mulled over James's words. How many small decisions, how many lies had my son told himself to justify his actions? At what point did he cross the line, transforming from a loving son into a conspirator willing to destroy his own mother? The following week, we faced the first court hearing. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The emails, the forged documents, the testimony of the doctor who had been bribed to issue the false report. Ryan's lawyer argued that he had acted under duress, fearing for his life due to his debts to criminals. He tried to paint my son as a victim of circumstance, someone who made mistakes out of desperation, not malice. When I had to testify, I looked directly at Ryan. He kept his eyes down, unable to meet my gaze. I described how they had tried to make me doubt my own mind, how they had drugged me, how they planned to tear me from my home and put me in an institution while they spent my money. "Do you believe your son poses a danger to you?" the prosecutor asked. I hesitated. Despite everything, he was my son. "I believe he poses a danger to himself and to anyone who has something he wants," I finally answered. I no longer recognize him as the son I raised. I saw Ryan shrink in his chair. After 3 weeks of hearings, the judge delivered his sentence. Ryan was sentenced to 6 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Caroline, in exchange for her cooperation, received a 3-year sentence, with the possibility of parole after 1 year. As the judge read the sentence, I watched Ryan. There was no arrogance left on his face, only defeat. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I thought I saw a glimmer of the boy he had been lost, scared, regretful. But then the moment passed, and he was led away by the guards. In the courthouse parking lot, James asked me, "How do you feel?" "Like I've lost a son all over again," I answered honestly. "Only this time, it was by his own choice. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive him?" I looked up at the sky, thinking about the answer. "I don't know, James. Forgiveness isn't something you decide in a day. It's a process. And us? What do we do now?" It was a good question. Our life had been turned upside down twice, first by James's death, then by Ryan's betrayal. "I think we need a fresh start," I suggested. "This house has too many memories now, some good, others too painful." In the following months, I put the house in Atlanta up for sale, ironically, fulfilling Ryan's wish, but on my own terms. James and I found a smaller, cozier house in a coastal city 2 hours away, like Street, Simon's Island, a place where no one knew us, where we wouldn't be the mother and brother of the man who tried to steal from his own family. On moving day, I took one last walk through the empty house where I raised my sons. Every room held memories: Ryan taking his first steps in this living room, James studying late in that bedroom, both of them running down the hall on rainy days. I stopped in Ryan's room, now empty except for a box I had set aside photos of him growing up, his school report cards, the drawings he made me for Mother's Day. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of those memories, even after everything. "Ready?" James asked, standing in the doorway. "Almost," I replied. "I just need a minute." When he left, I placed an envelope inside the box. It was a letter I had written to Ryan, not to send now, but maybe someday, when the wounds weren't so raw. "My son," the letter began. "I don't know when or if you will read this, but I want you to know that, despite everything that happened, a part of me still remembers the boy you were. I can't forgive what you did not now, maybe not ever. But I also can't erase 35 years of love. That will always be there, like a scar that never fully fades." I closed the box, took a deep breath, and prepared to leave that life behind. In the new house, James and I settled into a quiet routine. He continued to work remotely for the same company, though Stephen had offered him a partnership after all they had been through together. Our new home was just a few blocks from the beach in Street Simons. Every morning, I would walk on the sand, still cool from the night, watching the ocean in its eternal movement. There was something comforting in that constancy. The waves came and went, regardless of the human dramas unfolding on their shores. About 6 months after we moved, I received a letter from the penitentiary where Ryan was serving his sentence. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it, unsure if I wanted to read what was inside. "Let's face it together," James said, sitting beside me on the sofa. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. "Mom," the letter began. I don't know where to start. The words, "sorry" or "forgive me," seem so small compared to what I did that they're almost not worth writing. But they're the only ones I have. In here, I have a lot of time to think about how I got to this point, how I could conspire against the person who gave me life, who held my hand when I took my first steps, who stayed up all night when I had a fever. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to visit or to write me back. I just needed you to know that, in the middle of this darkness I'm in, I am finally seeing clearly the monster I became. The mandatory therapy in prison has helped me understand my behavioral patterns, how one lie led to another, how I convinced myself that money and status were more important than family, how I rationalized every terrible decision, telling myself it was just temporary, that one day I would make it all up. I know words are just words, especially coming from someone who lied as much as I did, but they are sincere, however empty that may sound right now. If someday, years from now, you feel you can give me the chance to prove with actions the remorse I feel, I'll be waiting. If not, I will understand. You've already suffered enough because of me. With love, even though I've proven I don't deserve to use that word, Ryan. When I finished reading, I realized I was crying. I didn't know exactly why, if it was for the loss of the son I knew, for the pain I still felt over his betrayal, or for some confusing hope that maybe, just maybe, those words were true. James remained silent, respecting my moment. "What do you think?" I finally asked. "Honestly? I don't know," he replied. Ryan was always good with words. Remember how he used to talk his way out of trouble in school? How he'd convince teachers he deserved a second chance? I nodded, remembering how my younger son had a gift for charming people. "But I also know that people can change," James continued, "especially when they hit rock bottom. And Ryan certainly did. Could you forgive him someday? Maybe. With a lot of time and a lot of proof that the change is real. But trusting him again? That would be much harder." I put the letter in a drawer, undecided if I would respond. A few days later, during my morning walk on the beach, I met an older woman sitting on a bench, watching the sea. We started talking, as happens in small towns. Her name was Amalia. She was 78, and she had lived alone since her husband passed away. When I mentioned I had recently moved to the city, she asked why. Surprisingly, I found myself telling her the whole story about James's fake death, Ryan's conspiracy, everything. It was the first time I had spoken about it with anyone other than James, Stephen, and the lawyers. "You know," Amalia said when I finished, "I have a story not so different." She told me that, decades ago, her daughter had stolen all her savings to support a drug addiction. She had lied, manipulated, and even threatened her own mother. "For years I didn't speak to her," Amalia explained. "I couldn't. The pain was too great. But one day, I received a letter similar to the one you describe. I ignored it. Then another came, and another. For 3 years my daughter wrote to me monthly, without me ever responding. And what happened?" I asked. In the 4th year, I decided to read all the letters at once. I saw a progression in them from desperation to acceptance, from self-pity to true remorse. In the last letter, she no longer asked for anything, just told me about her life, her recovery, how she was trying to help other people with similar problems. Amalia smiled, looking at the horizon. I decided to visit her. It was strange, painful, but also healing in a way. Today, we have a relationship. It's not perfect. It will never be like it was. But it's something. And you know what? I don't regret giving her that chance. Even if it had ended badly, I wouldn't regret it, because I needed to know, for myself, if it was possible to rebuild something from the ruins. Her words stayed with me for days. The following week, I wrote a brief reply to Ryan. "I received your letter. I am not ready to forgive or forget. I may never be. But I am willing to read what you have to say. That is all I can offer right now." It was the beginning of a cautious correspondence. At first, we exchanged letters every month. Ryan told me about his routine in prison, the therapy sessions, the jobs he performed inside. He never asked for anything, never pushed for visits or forgiveness. James, initially skeptical, began to admit that maybe there was a genuine change in his brother. "The letters seem different," he commented after reading one with my permission. "Less manipulative, more reflective." A year after the first letter, Ryan mentioned he was participating in a financial rehabilitation program, learning to handle money responsibly. He was also teaching math to other inmates, helping them get their high school diplomas. "I've discovered that teaching gives me a purpose that money never did," he wrote. To see someone understand a new concept, to see the pride in the eyes of men society has written off when they manage to solve a problem that's priceless. In the 2nd year of our correspondence, I made a difficult decision. I would go visit him. Are you sure? James asked, concerned. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. I need to see it with my own eyes, I replied. I need to look him in the eye and feel if there is truth in what he writes. The day of the visit arrived, cold and overcast. The penitentiary was an oppressive place. High walls, barbed wire fences, armed guards. I went through various security procedures before being led to the visiting room. When Ryan entered, I almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner, his hair short in the prison-style buzz cut, his face marked by a seriousness he never had before. His eyes, however, were the eyes of my younger son, now glistening as he saw me. "Mom," he said simply, his voice thick. "Ryan," I replied, maintaining my composure. We sat on opposite sides of a simple table. For a few minutes, neither of us could say anything. "Thank you for coming," he finally spoke. "I didn't expect." "Me neither," I admitted. It was a last-minute decision. "How's James?" he asked. It was the first time he had mentioned his brother in our correspondence. "He's okay. He still has nightmares about the fake funeral." Ryan looked down. I'm so sorry for everything. I know it doesn't mean much, but—" "Why, Ryan?" I interrupted, the question escaping me before I could stop it. "Why did you go so far?" He took a deep breath, as if he had been expecting that question. At first, it was just small bets. I thought I could control it. By the time I realized I couldn't, I was drowning in debt. Caroline liked a luxurious life, and I wanted to impress her. One thing led to another. I started borrowing money from dangerous people. Then came the pressure, the threats. "But why didn't you ask us for help?" Pride, shame. And after a while, the debts were so large I knew you couldn't help, even if you wanted to. That's when I started to see your assets as a solution. The brutal honesty of his words hit me like a punch. And drugging me? Making me think I was losing my mind? He closed his eyes, as if he couldn't bear his own reflection in my eyes. Each step seemed like a small transgression at the time. A stronger medication so you'd sleep and not notice when we took documents. Then, so you wouldn't question us when we talked about conversations that never happened. It was a slippery slope. Each little lie made the next one easier. Our conversation continued for almost an hour. There was no great catharsis, no dramatic moment of forgiveness or reconciliation. Just two adults, mother and son, trying to understand how they had gotten to this point. When I left the penitentiary that afternoon, I felt simultaneously exhausted and relieved. Seeing Ryan face to face, hearing his explanations, had brought a kind of closure that the letters couldn't provide. "How did it go?" James asked anxiously when I got home. "Difficult," I answered honestly, "but necessary." In the following months, I continued to exchange letters with Ryan, now more frequently. Occasionally, I would make another visit. James refused to accompany me, still not ready to face the brother who had killed him and conspired against their mother. Maybe someday, he would always say when I asked. But not now. I understood his resistance. The betrayal he suffered was twofold, not just as a son, but also as a brother who had his identity stolen, his death staged, all because of his own brother's greed. One day, about 2.5 years after Ryan's arrest, I received an unexpected call. "Mrs. Eleanor Reed? This is Dr. Silvera, a psychologist at the state penitentiary." "Yes," I replied, immediately fearing the worst. "Did something happen to my son?" No. Sorry to alarm you. Actually, I'm calling with good news. Your son has excelled in our rehabilitation program. He developed a math teaching method for inmates with learning difficulties that is getting remarkable results." "That's surprising," I commented. "Yes, and that's why I'm calling. We are considering Ryan for the work release program. He has already served more than a third of his sentence. He has shown excellent behavior and genuine remorse. With his background in administration, he could work during the day and return to the penitentiary at night." The news took me by surprise. Part of me felt happy for Ryan's progress, but another part felt an instinctive wariness. And when would this happen? "If all goes well in the final evaluation, within 3 months, the doctor explained. He mentioned that he would like to know your opinion before accepting the progression. That surprised me even more. My opinion? Why? He said he doesn't want you to feel uncomfortable or unsafe. If you prefer him to remain in the closed regime for longer, he will understand and wait. I promised the doctor I would think about it and give him an answer in a few days. When I told James, his reaction was one of skepticism. Work release? Already? And doesn't this supposed concern for your opinion seem a bit manipulative? Maybe, I admitted. But the psychologist seems genuinely impressed with his progress. Psychologists can be fooled, James argued. Ryan always knew how to present himself well when it suited him. That night, I reread all the letters Ryan had sent me over the last few years. I was looking for signs of manipulation, of falsehood, of a long-term plan. But what I saw was a progression, from the first letters full of self-pity to the more recent ones, where he talked about the other inmates he was helping, the small satisfactions of seeing someone learn something new, the therapy that was finally making him understand his own demons. The following week, during my regular visit, I confronted Ryan about the psychologist's call. "Why did you ask for my opinion on your work release?" He seemed genuinely surprised. "I thought it was the least I could do," Ryan replied, his gaze direct and unwavering. "After all the harm I caused, I don't want you to feel threatened or unsafe by me being freer. And if I say I prefer you to stay in the closed regime, then that's what I'll do," he replied simply. "I will wait as long as necessary." I studied his face, looking for signs of falsehood, of calculation. I found nothing but resigned acceptance. "Why are you teaching math to other inmates?" I asked, changing the subject. His face lit up slightly. "It started by chance. One of the guys in my cell block was trying to get his high school diploma, but was struggling with algebra. I offered to help. Soon others started asking too." He paused. "These men, Mom, many never had a real chance in life. Some can barely read. When I see the pride in their eyes when they solve a problem for the first time, it's like I'm doing something that actually matters." There was a sincerity in his voice that moved me. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the boy he had been. Curious, bright, always willing to explain things to others. After thinking for several days, I made my decision. I called Dr. Silvera and informed him that I did not object to Ryan's progression to work release. James was not happy. "We're taking an unnecessary risk," he argued. "What if he goes back to his old ways? What if he decides to visit you when he's out during the day? He'll be monitored," I explained. "And honestly, James, at some point we have to accept the possibility that people can change." "Some people, maybe," he replied. "But Ryan fooled us for so long." "I know it's harder for you," I acknowledged. "He didn't just betray your trust, he forced you into an extreme situation. I'm not asking you to forgive him, just to accept that I'm willing to give him this chance." 3 months later, Ryan began the work release program. He got a job at a nonprofit organization that worked with the reintegration of ex-convicts, where he used his administrative skills during the day, returning to the penitentiary at night and on weekends. In his letters, he described his work with enthusiasm. "I'm helping people who made mistakes like me find a way back into society." It's ironic and fitting at the same time. We spent another year in that routine, Ryan working during the day, serving his sentence at night, our occasional visits and frequent letters. James remained reluctant to have any contact with his brother, although I noticed he asked more questions about Ryan, about his work, about his apparent rehabilitation. Then, the day of the hearing for progression to a halfway house arrived. Ryan could live in a transitional home, only needing to check in periodically with the justice system. "I'm going to the hearing," I announced to James the night before. He was silent for a moment, then said something that surprised me. "I'll go too. Are you sure?" "No," he admitted, "but I think it's time to face this as a family, or what's left of it." The hearing was brief, but intense. The judge reviewed Ryan's record in prison, heard testimonies from psychologists and supervisors, all positive. When he asked if anyone from the family would like to speak, I stood up. "My son made grave mistakes," I began, feeling the weight of every word. "He conspired against me, betrayed my trust, caused immense suffering for our family. But in the last 3 years, I have seen a consistent and genuine effort on his part to change, to understand the reasons behind his actions, and to repair, as much as possible, the the damage he caused. I support his progression to a halfway house. To my surprise, James also stood up. Your Honor, I am James Reed, the defendant's brother. I was a direct victim of his actions, having been forced to fake my own death to protect our mother from his plans. He paused, looking directly at Ryan for the first time in almost 4 years. I am not ready to forgive my brother. I may never be. But I recognize the efforts he has made. I do not object to his progression. I saw Ryan bow his head, silent tears running down his face. The judge granted the progression. When the hearing ended, Ryan approached us hesitantly. Thank you, he said simply. I don't deserve this, but I am going to try to live up to the opportunity you're giving me. James just nodded briefly, still unable to express any affection, but that small gesture meant more than 1,000 words. In the following weeks, Ryan settled into a halfway house, continuing his work at the non-profit. He also started a night course for a bachelor's degree in mathematics. He wanted to become a teacher. I discovered that teaching gives me a purpose I never found before, he wrote. I want to do something that really matters, that helps other people. About 6 months after his move to the halfway house, Ryan asked for something that took me by surprise. He wanted to invite us, James and me, to lunch. I completely understand if you refuse, he wrote. But I would like the chance to be with you outside the prison environment, like a family, or at least to try. I showed the letter to James, expecting his immediate refusal. He read it in silence, then sighed deeply. I think it's time, he said finally, not for him, but for us, to close this chapter in some way. The lunch took place in a simple restaurant near the halfway house. At first, the atmosphere was tense, laden with unsaid words and deep resentments. But gradually, as the meal progressed, something began to shift. It wasn't a miraculous reconciliation. There were no emotional hugs or instant forgiveness. Just 3 people trying to find a new way to coexist, aware of the past, but not completely imprisoned by it. The following years were a slow process of rebuilding. Ryan finished serving his sentence. He got his degree as a math teacher and started working at a public school in a rough neighborhood in Atlanta, teaching at-risk teenagers. Our family lunches became more frequent monthly, then bi-weekly. James and Ryan never regained the closeness they had in childhood, but they developed a cautious respect for each other. Deep wounds like ours don't heal completely, but over time, the sharp pain gave way to a melancholic acceptance. 5 years after that call that changed everything, we received an invitation from Ryan. He was graduating with honors from his degree program and would like us to be present. At the ceremony, I watched my younger son receive his diploma, his face mature and serene, so different from the desperate, greedy man who had conspired against his own mother. At his side, a young teacher from the same school where he worked, Marina, his girlfriend for almost a year, a gentle woman who knew our whole story and still chose to stay by his side. Are you okay? James asked, noticing my teary eyes. I'm thinking about how unpredictable life is, I replied. If someone had told me 6 years ago that the 3 of us would be here today, celebrating Ryan's graduation, you would have thought they were crazy, he finished. And yet, here we are. After the ceremony, Ryan approached us, holding his diploma and bringing Marina by the hand. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice thick. It means more than I can express. We're proud of you, I replied, and I realized it was true. James extended his hand to his brother, a gesture that, in its simplicity, carried enormous weight. Good work, he said simply. That night, after James went home, I sat on the balcony of my house by the sea and street, Simon's, reflecting on the extraordinary journey our family had taken, from betrayal to redemption, from mourning to rebirth, from distrust to the possibility of renewed trust. I thought about how our lives had been transformed by a single desperate decision by James, faking his own death to protect me. What would have happened if he hadn't been so vigilant, if he hadn't discovered Ryan's plans in time? I would probably be in some institution, drugged and confused, while Ryan and Caroline exhausted my savings. Or perhaps worse. I also thought about Caroline, who served her reduced sentence and disappeared from our lives. According to the latest rumors, she had married a businessman in another city, completely reinventing herself. I sincerely hoped she had also found a better path. I realized I was smiling, despite everything. Not because the past didn't matter. It would always matter. It would always be part of who we were. But because we had found a way not to let it define our future. The next morning, Ryan showed up for coffee. He was nervous, fidgety. "There's something I want to ask you," he said finally. "I will completely understand if the answer is no." "What is it?" "Marina and I are thinking about getting married next year." "That's wonderful," I replied sincerely. Marina was a good influence in his life, an anchor of stability. "Yes, but, well, we're looking for a place to live. Something small, modest, near the school where we work. And I was wondering if you would lend me some money for the down payment." I felt a pang of apprehension. Money had been the trigger for all the tragedy in our family. "It's not much," he continued quickly, sensing my hesitation. "I have some savings. Marina does too. It would just be to supplement. And, of course, we would make a formal contract with monthly payments." I held up my hand, interrupting him. "Ryan, I'm going to think about it. Not because I don't trust you now, but because we need to be careful with these issues in our family, considering our history." He nodded, visibly relieved that I hadn't refused outright. "Of course, Mom. Take all the time you need, and if the answer is no, I'll understand completely." When he left, I called James. I told him about Ryan's request. "What do you think?" I asked. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I think it's a test," he said finally. "Not for Ryan, but for us. To see if we really believe he's changed. And do you?" Another silence. "I think he's trying," James answered cautiously. "I think he's no longer the person he was. But I think we should be smart." "How?" "Maybe we can help in a way that doesn't involve handing over money directly. We could co-sign the loan, for example, or buy the house and set up a formal rent-to-own contract." It was a sensible suggestion, a middle ground between trust and caution. 2 days later, I called Ryan to talk. I explained the proposal James and I had worked out. "It's not a matter of not trusting you," I explained. "It's about setting healthy boundaries after everything we've been through." To my surprise, Ryan seemed genuinely relieved. "That's perfect," he said. "To be honest, I was worried after I asked. I thought it might give the wrong impression, that it might look like I'm falling back into old habits." "Did you think about that?" "I think about it every day, Mom. I'm afraid of going back to being the person I was, of disappointing you again, of disappointing myself. It's a constant struggle." That honest admission meant more to me than any grandiose promise ever could. In the following months, we worked together to find a suitable house for Ryan and Marina near Atlanta. James, with his financial knowledge, structured a fair contract that protected all parties. It was an exercise in cautious trust, of gradual rebuilding. The day Ryan and Marina moved into the new house, we had a small celebration, just the 4 of us, with a simple meal in the newly acquired backyard. "A toast," I proposed, raising my glass, "to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," everyone repeated. As I watched my 2 sons talking civilly, I couldn't help but reflect on the extraordinary journey we had taken, from desperation to hope, from betrayal to an incomplete but meaningful redemption. "What are you thinking about?" Marina asked, sitting beside me while the brothers discussed the best way to fix the back deck. "About how life rarely follows the path we expect," I replied, "and about how sometimes, from the greatest tragedies, opportunities for growth can arise that we would never have imagined." She smiled, covering my hand with hers. "Ryan tells me stories about what you were like when he was a boy. He says you were always the strength of the family, even before all this happened." "I didn't feel strong when I found out the truth about his plans," I admitted. "I felt broken, betrayed, lost. But you survived," she observed. "And more than that, you found a path forward not just for yourself, but for the whole family." I looked again at my sons, James showing Ryan how the deck wood needed to be treated, Ryan listening attentively, respectfully. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I had dreamed for us so many years ago. But it was real, it was honest, and that had its own kind of beauty. "You know," I said to Marina, "for a long time, I thought our story was about betrayal. Then I thought it was about forgiveness. Now I realize it's about something more complex. about how to move forward even when complete forgiveness may never come, about finding a new kind of relationship from the ashes of the old one. She nodded, understanding perfectly. Ryan knows that too, she said softly. He knows that some bridges, once burned, can never be fully rebuilt. But he's grateful that you at least built a narrow footbridge to cross the abyss. A narrow footbridge. It was a good metaphor for what we had achieved. Not the wide bridge of unrestricted trust we had before, but a fragile, carefully maintained connection that allowed for some kind of relationship. As the sun began to set, I cast one last look at my sons before announcing it was time for me to go. They were side by side now, not exactly close, but not distant either, working together to measure boards for the deck. It was an image I would never have thought possible 6 years ago, when I received that fateful call from James's boss. An image that spoke not of perfect happy endings, but of overcoming, resilience, and the complex, imperfect, but deeply human capacity to begin again. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what part left you speechless? Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you there.